Watching Nvidia and after hours, it reported at 4:20 Eastern time, and initially it dropped more than 4%. Tried to pop up higher to test the highs, couldn't exceed them, and it turned down. Remember, there's major resistance directly overhead. Ended up turning down. The after hours and the 5 minute time frame we're looking at, we had this sharp decline of over 4% or so from the close, and then it rallied back up, and it's been trying to stabilize around 2.5 to 3.5% lower. It's trying to stabilize in that range right there. The conference call is about to begin. There were sky high expectations for Nvidia, even though it beat on earnings. The expectations were that it would far exceed them, and guidance going forward would just be perfect. And traders and investors set the bar too high. That's why it's selling off in after hours, even though we did get good earnings on Nvidia. As we move into the conference call here, we're just minutes away from it. We're trying to get a little bit of a bounce here. Again, trying to stabilize in the 2.5 to 3.5% level, down 2.5 and 2.5 to 3.5% lower, after dropping over 4% initially with the release of the earnings. 5 minute chart here on Nvidia. Currently, it's around. Well, let's just take a look at it. Hang on. Video just a little bit late. I was watching Nvidia earnings, and currently down around 2.73% at the moment. Again, it's been hovering around 2.5% lower to 3.5% lower, trying to stabilize right here as we move into the conference, which is going to start in minutes. We're about 2 minutes away from that at the moment. But here's the initial drop, and then we're trying to stabilize at the moment down between 2.5 to 3.5% lower, hovering between those levels. Currently hovering right now at the moment, the 167.5 area or so, closed down by 9 cents ahead of earnings to 181. Currently at the moment, 176.71, down 2.68%. See what happens during the conference call and by tomorrow's close. Try to recover a little bit with the conference call and then end up selling off after that, or sell off more. How does it close by tomorrow's closing bell? That's what we're going to be watching. And again, the earnings expectation. Sorry about that. Earnings expectations were sky high, and that's why it's down. The expectations with guidance, the expectations with earnings, they came in better than expected, but they were looking for the situation where the earnings massively exceed the estimate. It came in better, and it was at 1.01. The word all over the internet was that it was going to be about 1.06, and at 1.05, beating estimates, but a lot of analysts were looking for this to be much, much better, much, much higher. Same with revenue. Another reason is the company said going forward, quarter three revenue is expected to be $54 billion, plus or minus 2%. This is better than the $53.1 billion. However, analysts were looking for significant upside for quarter three, not just a slightly better number at $54 billion. So again, our guidance concerns going forward, and that's why it is down. We'll see what happens. The conference call has now begun. Before this page, overall company revenue did rise by 56% in the quarter, and good earnings. Just we had high expectations. Seen this before with other earnings reports for Nvidia. They set the bar so high, even though we get good earnings, there's disappointment on expectations going forward and expectations on earnings, even though they're good earnings. Again, Nvidia down about the same amount, 2.63% at the moment. Again, that 2.5 to 3.5% level, it's stabilized as it dropped. See if it escalates to the downside after they finish the conference call and what happens during tomorrow's session. It could be sharply lower by tomorrow with such high expectations. So we'll be watching that into the open tomorrow and then through the session. Flat, down 9 cents. And again, we've rallied back up just above that 50-period moving average. We've gotten a lower high, and after hours, we're down. Here we are with the close at 181. Currently, Nvidia's down around 170, down to 177, 176, fluctuating as it's trying to stabilize after the sell-off. But do we come back down and take out this low and take out the 50 and start getting a bigger corrective move? High holds, again, likely completed a wave 3. We're going to get a wave 4. I think eventually a wave 5 in the coming months ahead, maybe October, November, see a final peak. But we have this massive broadening formation. I don't believe it's done here. I think we'll see a sell-off. I think we'll rebound. But I think that you will end up going at that massive channel line in the weekly time frame. And we're just under it right now, and possibly now going to have a lower high and lower low for Nvidia. We've had that divergence give us a sell-off. Now do we set up a lower high and continue to sell off? The divergence on the price oscillator and the MACD did go higher. It's rolled over. Do we now see with the earnings, does that put a drag on the market and Nvidia leads the market lower? Remember, NASDAQ 100 has had bearish signals. Signals remain bearish. NASDAQ 100 futures is down in after hours right now. So if Nvidia does end up lower by the close of the session tomorrow, we could be on our way for a larger correction. Then we could get the PCE data. If it comes in hot, the inflation data, the Fed's favorite gauge of inflation, see a big sell-off before the weekends. I've talked about this. We had the hanging man candlesticks on the weekly charts. I talked about it in great length and detail in yesterday's video. They could be confirmed before the week ends if we end up getting a sell-off with Nvidia and with the inflation data. Trump could also end up rattling the market with his tariffs. We're expecting a semiconductor tariff announcement out of Trump. Other tariff announcements that are coming. Trump is overdue to rattle the markets with his tariffs. I told you yesterday and then today on social media, I told you expectations for Nvidia were very, very high. I told you yesterday we could even go higher on Nvidia and still end up having it be a reversal bar. Attempted to try to rally up into resistance levels. Tried to pop to test the previous high. We were just below it in after hours, and then we're selling off. We close by tomorrow. Told you to be watching this trend line. Told you that when we were slamming into resistance again at the mid-August highs, the August 13th for the NASDAQ, August 15th for the S&P 500. Up until today, the S&P did exceed it. Told you to be watching. We had it on Nvidia. Be watching trend line. I told you when this trend line breaks, we'll likely see the market correct. So far, we've seen a 4.30% correction for the NASDAQ, and it's rallied up Fibonacci retracements just above the 10-period moving average. The P went sideways, it sold off, and it went slightly higher today, currently down in after hours. We'll see what it looks like by tomorrow. But if this trend line breaks and we end up with a lower high and a lower low, taking out the 50 period, then again, I would expect to move back towards the 200 period moving average, moving towards it. We may not reach it, but moving towards it for larger correction before going higher. So this is what I'm looking at with Nvidia. And as we hit this upper boundary right here, went a little bit higher, we formed divergences on the daily chart as I showed you on the other chart. We broke the trend line. We were slamming into the trend line of resistance. We were just a whisker away from it. Long-term channel in the weekly time frame. Here it is. We came right up to it, just a fraction underneath it. You've got this broadening formation. This is the long-term channel on Nvidia. I told you this is where I was looking for rejection. We got rejection at this level in June of 2024. We came towards it with the peaks after that moved slightly higher. We came to just under it. I expect a pullback here and then to push up into it one final time for the final climax top. And then I think we're going to top, and I think Nvidia will eventually collapse down to this trend line right here and go down about 80 or 90%, move into the bear market. I think Nvidia will peak near this trend line, a little bit higher levels as we go towards the end of the year, at October, November, December, leaning towards October, November, I think we'll see a peak in the market, a peak with Bitcoin and a peak with Nvidia. Nvidia got a hanging man candlestick just like the NASDAQ did, but it was lower. It wasn't at the very peak. It was with a lower high. We got that last week. You can see that right here on the weekly chart. Bring it up a little closer so you can see it. NASDAQ got the same candle. If we confirm it by the end of the week, if we sell off with Nvidia earnings and sell off with the PCE data, or if Trump rattles a market, we could see confirmation of that in the weekly time frame and end up getting a bigger pullback, maybe bigger than what I've marked here. Again, I just marked it a little bit lower. It could be much lower or a lot lower. And then we go back up and eventually hit this level in the coming months ahead. And I think that's going to take Nvidia towards the $200 area. And I think that once we see that happen, a video peak. Let me adjust this to show you again. If we do get a little bit bigger of a pullback or something, we could see move towards that 200 period or even try to reach it, something bigger. But eventually, I think we're going to hit this trend line. We were just a whisker away from it. We didn't quite reach it over this 3-week period. We didn't reach it. We tried to over 3 weeks and we couldn't. We did hit it back over here in June. But again, I think we're going to sell off, and then I think Nvidia is going to move towards this $200 area. And if we hit that come October or November, I think you're going to move towards it. And again, if we reach it by November or so, let me see here, right around the end of November or on into early December, you could reach $200. You may fall short of it, but I think we're going to move back towards 200, up again towards this trend line, towards 200, and that's where I think Nvidia is likely going to top out. So I do think we'll get that bigger pullback and then the bounce. That's what I think is happening. I think this broadening formation, which is a 5-point reversal, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, and I think it will finish up here somewhere. I don't think it's done here, but this is what I think is going on. NASDAQ has a broadening formation as well. We'll see by the end of the week, do we try to confirm this candlestick as I've talked about. Please support the channel with the link directly below. That allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you like the charts, you like the indicators, please let me know that by supporting the channel. If you follow the link below to take you to a secured site, you can donate any amount you want or make it a recurring donation. If you do that, I thank you. Thank you for your consideration for that. The VIX up by 1.5% today. We've had these divergences form on the RSI, the MACD, and the stochastic. Got these divergences, stochastic turning back up and getting a bullish cross today. Do we see volatility now return surrounding the Nvidia earning? The PCE inflation data later this week, and we know more tariff announcements are coming out of Trump. Does that end up rattling the market? We're expecting a semiconductor announcement out of Trump any day now. That this week. One was coming next couple of weeks. Well, the completion of this week by Friday, that's 2 weeks. Could hear from Trump on tariffs here for the weekends or going into Labor Day weekend just after it. Again, these divergences are likely going to give us a spike in volatility. And again, in order for that to happen, we got to get the MACD back into positive territory. We got to get the RSI back above 50, and then we got to get back above the 50 moving average, 50-day moving average on the VIX. That's that green line right there. We turned up to it and we stalled at it and pushed right back down here. In order for the S&P to sell off, you got to get back above the 50-period moving average on the VIX. When you do, bad things start happening on the S&P 500. But these divergences that have formed, bullish divergences on the VIX, likely suggesting we're going to get pullback. But the NASDAQ off and now has a counter trend. The S&P had sell-offs in July 31st and then August 15th, drifting slightly higher trading range, and today moving slightly above the previous peak by 6 points on the August 15th high. See that in this video. And on the weekly chart of Nvidia here, bouncing off the 10-week moving average, we end up selling off with the earnings and the PCE inflation data, or maybe Trump adds fuel to the fire and rattles markets with tariffs. But if we sell off with the earnings and right now the PCE data that's coming before the market opens on Friday, then I'll be watching. Do we confirm this on Nvidia? And again, NASDAQ chart looks identical. with the same candlestick, hitting a lower high here with Nvidia. Again, we went back up in after hours to try to test those highs, but then sold off, at least so far. We'll be watching to see how Nvidia closes out the session tomorrow. How does it open? Does it open sharply lower than it is now, or right around where it is now, or does it try to rebound? We'll see what happens. NASDAQ 100 weekly chart. Again, the candlestick looks identical, the 10-week moving average right here. And again, how do we close? Now, NASDAQ 100 is struggling at the 10-day moving average. We're just above it in our 51.8, or I'm sorry, our 61.8 Fibonacci retracement of the decline. And I'll show you that chart. How do we close? Do we confirm this candlestick and drop back below the 10-week moving average by the end of the week like Bitcoin has already done, and we follow Bitcoin lower? It's already given back the Powell rally. Does NASDAQ and S&P join it? A positive correlation often, sometimes there are periods of decoupling, and I told you I think that we're going to see S&P and NASDAQ join Bitcoin, but we'll see what becomes of these hanging man candlesticks. So far, our topping tail here on the NASDAQ weekly chart at key resistance is holding so far. The August 13th peak. S&P 500 got one. Hanging man candlestick. The S&P is pushing higher right now than the previous high we had back over here on August 15th. We're just slightly above it. The S&P, I believe, has moved just a fraction above that August 15th high, but we did make a new high today on the S&P 500. How do we close by the end of the week? Do we end up closing below this low? Do we end up with the red bar and a reversal, possibly with an Nvidia sell-off surrounding earnings? We'll see what happens with the PCE inflation data before the market opens on Friday. S&P has been struggling to get above the trend lines of resistance in the weekly time frame. We're still struggling here. We're just slightly above this trend line here with our log scaling from the 2022 peak over here connected to our December peak 2024, and we've slammed into it again here over the last few weeks. We hit it at the July high, turned down, no confirmation to that bearish engulfing, and came back up and slammed right into it again. We get rejection here and a pullback towards the 20 period moving average. I think that's likely. And then again, I think we go on our way and try to move towards this trend line right here. That's why I think we'll move towards 6,700, maybe even higher towards 6,800 if we try to reach that level over the next few months. Bitcoin cycle, I talked about in my Bitcoin videos, is suggesting that Bitcoin's going to peak in the next couple of months here, looking for a Bitcoin top, maybe by October or November. Bitcoin and the market are stalling at trend lines. Those trend lines end up giving us massive reversals. Then the risk is that we've topped. I still think we're going to go higher, but the risk is that we're stalling at these resistance levels. My guess is that's not going to be the case, but I'm open-minded to that. So we're stalling at this trend line with our log scaling, stalling at this trend line from the 2023 low with our linear scaling. As I've said, I told you if we try to rally with Nvidia earnings, you want to be watching that trend line. It's, rising to the right of the chart, so it would take us towards the low 6,500 area. Rejection from our recent touch of that trend line, and we did move slightly higher today, but we're still not quite touching it. Rejection at that trend line opens the door to go back and test the 20-week moving average, the blue line right there, back towards the 200 in the daily. But again, eventually I think these trend lines are going to be tested. This is our trend line from the 2020 low. And again, I think these trend lines are where we are headed. I'm looking for a pullback, and then again, the final climax high, the final phase of the blow-off top has already begun. That final climax move, I think, moving towards around 6,700, maybe a little higher, maybe a little bit lower, but that's where I think we are headed. It's closer to 68 or 6,900, these trend lines, depending on when we come into contact with them. If we pull back and then we rally up, we could see that final climax move coming months ahead. 23 trend line in the daily time frame, the blue trend line right here. I've talked about, again, how it's acted as resistance at the rally to the July 31st high, again to the August 15th high. Right now we made a new high intraday here today, but we have not reached that trend line. A rally higher slams into that trend line again. We got rejection at it in July, we got rejection at it in August. We've moved slightly higher today. but we haven't reached it. If we do, that's where resistance is under the S&P. If we turn down with the Nvidia earnings or with the PCE data or Trump rattling the markets, this is a trend line you want to be watching. We had a bottom there in May. We had a bottom here in June. We had a bottom here on August 1st, and then we touched it again last week. So that trend line, if you break it, will get the bigger sell-off. We did break this trend line from the April low to that August 1st low and back tested it. And now do we end up turning back down, breaking the red trend line, or go up to the blue trend line for a test? Right now, Nvidia's down in after hours, down over 2%, trying to stabilize, being down over 4%. We'll see how it closes. Do we break that trend line with the S&P 500? Break of the red trend line is bearish. Push to the blue trend line is major resistance. We've already turned off of it the last time we've tagged the trend line there on August 15th. Green cloud yesterday and a blue bar, but so far it hasn't moved to a new high. We did get a green awesome oscillator bar today. Does that quickly go away and we go negative? The MACD goes negative. We get a bigger sell-off trying to drop below the 50 and moving back towards the 200. The risk is Nvidia slams up into that trend line of resistance that I'm showing you in the weekly time frame, ends up moving to a new high, getting another reference point of a divergence. We've already had one here. Do we now validate a lower high and see this go negative? Or and in order to do that, right now, a 2.5% in the after hours, you got to drop below the 10-period moving average, which at the moment Nvidia has done that, but you got to take out the lower boundary of the cloud here at about 175 currently, where it's at about 177. So after hours dipping below the 10-period, you got to take out the 175 area if you're going to flip the cloud back to bearish to validate a lower high and try to come down, take out this low, and take out the 50-period moving average. So again, going to be watching, do we see more green bars? They turn green, we turn down, and they eventually turn red and go negative and validate a lower high for Nvidia. Signals remain bearish on NASDAQ 100. We're just above that 10-period moving average. We got a green bar today. Again, do we just see a confirmation of a lower high, come back, take out that low, take out the 50 like Nvidia, or Nvidia recover and try to help the NASDAQ get a bullish reversal of conditions? Right now, signals are bearish on NASDAQ, still bullish on the S&P 500. We'll be watching to see, does NASDAQ join S&P or does S&P join the NASDAQ? And if Nvidia were to try to go higher, there's major resistance, as I keep saying, directly overhead at the trend line. We were just a whisker away from hitting it. Again, it very well have been close but no cigar. If we can validate a lower high and a lower low on Nvidia, we can get a bigger sell-off for the market. We've gone sideways here on the NASDAQ. You can clearly see we drifted higher, sold off, and now we've got a lower high. And again, still have a bearish reversal of conditions with red bars, a red cloud stalling at a Fibonacci retracement. I'll show you that in just a moment. Forget, again, with that hanging man candlestick that we had last week, we're getting the red bar on the awesome oscillator in the weekly time frame this week. So again, I think you can try to get this pullback towards these 20-week moving averages on NASDAQ. That's at 21,900. Currently, we're at 23,565 at our close. I think we can move back towards the 20-week moving averages, back towards the 200s. Maybe we test them, maybe we come just towards them, but I think we're going to move downward. And if we sell off by the end of the week and confirm the hanging man candlestick, you could see a red bar not only here, but on the S&P 500. Doesn't have a red bar yet here on the awesome oscillator. Could get one next week, but you've got, again, the same kind of candlestick. We're still above the 10-week moving average. Bitcoin is pulling off. Does the NASDAQ and S&P join Bitcoin? Weekly chart of the S&P here. Now we saw that bullish reversal of conditions 4 sessions ago with the Powell rally. We moved higher today. The NASDAQ is not doing that. Far, the NASDAQ is come up to the 10-period moving average. It's stalled there. Now it's just slightly above it. And we're coming back to the July 31st peak right there and stalling there. And I think that's at the 61.8 Fibonacci. NASDAQ would have to be able to clear this resistance area here above with our cloud here in order to flip back to bullish. And even if it does flip back to bullish, then you could still establish a lower high. S&P is moving to a new high right now. The NASDAQ is not. They're diverging. They did diverge back over here. NASDAQ peaked on August 13th. S&P peaked on August 15th with that bar. NASDAQ got a lower high. S&P got a higher high. Now S&P is moving to a new high. NASDAQ's not doing it. So this is a warning sign because they are diverging from one another. S&P manages to get a bigger rally and we get more green bars, and NASDAQ 100 ends up going higher. Can still get a lower high and diverge even if S&P tries to make its way towards that 2023 trend line I'm showing you. If we try to make it towards it, could easily stall there. Now, if we sell off with Nvidia, maybe Nvidia drags the whole market down with it. It's down in after hours. We'll see what it looks like by the close of tomorrow's session. NASDAQ confirm a lower high right here, or try to go higher. S&P slam into the blue trend line or go back and break the red one that I'm showing you in this video. The trend line of support. NASDAQ is going just above the 10-period moving average, just testing this peak over here with the Powell rally moving slightly above that level, and it is stalling at the 61.8 Fibonacci of this entire decline. This decline was 4.30% towards our 50-period moving average. So we dropped more than 4%. Now we've tried to rebound back up, but we're making a lower high. NASDAQ, again, has likely already peaked. Our black candlestick slamming into key resistance. S&P has drifted slightly higher. Had that high on the Dow masquerading the tech sell-off that we've been witnessing. Warned you could happen. Oftentimes they push the Dow up higher. We see this tech begin to sell off. So right now, we've gotten above the cloud here. It's still red into the future, and we're just above our 10 period. If we end up getting a lower high here, or even if we try to go higher and go towards maybe the 78.6 Fibonacci, maybe somewhere in this area, I don't have it marked on this chart, but the 78.6 Fibonacci on this Fibonacci retracement, reasons I have no idea. Why would anybody make a Fibonacci retracement here and not put a 78.6 Fibonacci on it? But my other charts have it. This one doesn't. Stalling currently at the 61.8 Fibonacci of the entire decline. So again, here the lower end of the golden pocket. If we go higher, the 78.6 Fibonacci. So again, I'll be watching. Do we end up selling off with Nvidia selling off so far? And after hours, it's down more than 2.5% at the moment. These divergences, do they now play out and we get a bigger drop? We've already seen the drop, 4.30%, but because S&P sold off by 2.20% and now is going higher, it's kind of camouflaging what is going on, and that is that we're seeing a tech sell-off. It get worse with the Nvidia earnings if we do see Nvidia go sharply lower by tomorrow's close. S&P 500 rose by 15 points today. It rose by 0.24%, just under 0.25%. It rose up to 64.87, slightly above 64.81. And then we didn't close there. We pushed back, and guess where we closed? You guessed it, 64.81. That's where we closed. So we closed just slightly, or we had an intraday push slightly above that level and closed at that same intraday high as we had over here. That's where we closed. We still go higher and hit the blue trend line from the 2023 level if we can either rally to go higher. But if Nvidia drags the market down, then we can complete this triple divergence right here, right now. There may be a little bit more to it. We go into the Labor Day holiday. The market will be closed on Monday next week, but we're going to get the PCE inflation data, and then we'll see how does Nvidia impact earnings, or how does the Nvidia earnings impact the market tomorrow, I should say. And again, we've got this triple divergence going on here. Again, the July peak slammed into the trend line of resistance. The August 15th peak, we slammed into the trend line of resistance. We're not slamming into it. We still may go above this level a little bit. Again, that would take us to the low 6,500 area. But if we end up selling off with Nvidia earnings, then maybe we just have a little head fake here. But you've got potentially a double top right here completed. Or if we go a little bit higher, again, still a double top pattern. Is exactly what Bitcoin formed when it peaked back in mid-August. Bitcoin peaked at the August August high on the 14th. The S&P peaked on the 15th here. We're slightly above that level now. We had dropped by 2.20%, had a 5-day losing streak, rebounded with Fed Chair Powell's comments at Jackson Hole, and then we're slightly above that level now. We are currently 0.91%. We were 0.85% above the July 31st peak. That was 0.85% on an intraday basis at that high for August 15th. We are currently, right now at the moment, 0.91% higher than that July peak. So we're just a little bit above it as we continue to slam into the resistance in July and August. Right now we're just below it. We may hit it again and go higher. Divergence is not done yet, but it might just be a little head fake here, and we might turn right back down. A head fake is when you push above resistance and then quickly turn right back down without confirmation of a breakout. You end up stalling there or pushing above it, and then it immediately fails in a few days. So we'll be watching this area closely. We may reach that blue line if the S&P can hold above the 10-period moving average. That is the red line right there. So we'll be watching the impact of Nvidia earnings on the market. Remember, S&P is making a new high. NASDAQ's not. Remember, with the Powell rally, we saw the Dow move to a new high. NASDAQ didn't move to a new high, it just rallied up. Fibonacci retracements, and again, I told you that could be masquerading what is going on, disguising the beginning of the sell-off in tech. New highs on the Dow may not be done yet if the S&P moves towards that blue trend line from the 2023 low, but if NASDAQ rallies up higher, you still have your 78.6 Fibonacci, still far away from the peak on August 13th on the NASDAQ.